All right. Hello, everyone. Um, just got the message that we are live, so we can begin. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can all be looking at what I'm looking at. All right. Okay. All right. So I am Kate Panfile. I am a learning disabilities teacher consultant here in the United States. So if you're joining from the East Coast, good morning. And I hope you already scored some Black Friday shopping deals. If you are joining from somewhere else in the world, I'm so happy to have you and connect with you. And talk to you today because if there's one thing I love, it is talking about all things autism, neurodiversity, the autistic brain style, special education, because it is the life that I lead both professionally and personally. So I am going to share it all with you today. So today we are, and I should mention, if you have any questions as we go through anything, please put them in the chat. I will try to get to everything by the end of our time together. But if I don't, I can reach back out to you. I have my contact information at the end of this, and Autism Connect has been such a wonderful host. I'm so happy to partner with them, and they will get you the information too. So we will make sure that we connect. So today we're going to be talking about reframing autism and what that means. And basically, that's a very fancy way of saying that we are going to be trying to do our best to understand the autistic brain style, because the one thing that we have, and I say we as an autistic community. Oh man, I lost my headphone already. All right, so hopefully we got the only mess up today out of the way. All right. So when we're talking about the autistic brain style, we, the autistic community, and the allies of the autistic community have been working really, really hard to shift from awareness to acceptance, um, for researching information from the actually autistic community. So having our autistic voices put out the information. And this is a change from how it used to be, even a few short decades ago, probably more recent than that. So a little bit about me. I am a neuro inclusion learning strategist, meaning I look for ways to create inclusive spaces in a world set up for a neurotypical brain, so a non-autistic brain. I am an autistic support strategist working with families and children, but also adults on understanding the brain style and understanding the autistic brain style specifically, and working with parents to build deeper connections with their children so that they have more peaceful moments at home. Because if there's one thing that I know to be true from my experience, which I will share a little bit about, is that when you get an autism diagnosis in your own home, for your own child, for yourself, for a loved one, there's a shift that has to happen, because ultimately it is a different way of communicating. And when we are able to kind of break those barriers down, we are able to build those deeper connections and feel understood. I am affiliated with the more psychological group. I do evaluations, achievement, educational, but also autism and neurodiversity profile developing. I have also partnered with Brave Wings Therapy to bring professional development and education to their staff. And I was also featured on the Intentional IEP as well, which is a great resource for all things individualized education programming. So regardless of where you are, most likely you have some form of an IEP or an individualized education program, and we can get you hooked up with that, because having that for your child is essential to navigating the special education process, the world with accommodations and modifications, and again, really fostering those that connection and that understanding on how to meet the needs of your child. So one thing I want to share with you, and this is something that if you had told me like 10 years ago, yeah, you're going to share a bunch of pictures from your vacation, this would not have been something that I ever thought I would do. But you see that we go to the Outer Banks. OBX. This is in North Carolina. It's a popular beach destination for the United States, for the East Coast. And it is somewhere that we have been going as a family since, as you can see, in 2016, when my third child, my daughter, was only 6 months old. And boy, were we unprepared in so many ways. At that point in time, we didn't even have an autism diagnosis. We did not know what we were navigating. We just knew that things were a little bit more difficult than they should be, whether it was routine, transition, and all the things, right? And we were in the thick of it for sure. We had 3 kids under 3. My husband and I are both in special education. As I started as a teacher, he is still a teacher. And then I ultimately transitioned to my role now through first doing learning consulting in a school. So we go on our summer vacation, and you can see the first couple years we were able to get the kids to take pictures, right? They were very little. It was it was really it was just, kind of point and click. You see they're not even all looking at the camera. But we had those family pictures. You see that in 2018 there's a missing picture. And this was something that for me, when I look back, was a pivotal turning point for our family. And it was really because when you start parenting, when you have children, you really, it's your expectation as a parent of what that's going to look like, right? We're going to do the family pictures. We're going to have everyone dressed up. For me, at least, that was one of them. So ultimately, I really wanted the picture on the beach that you see, you see in the movies and when you're walking down the beach, where all the families are dressed in matching outfits and they're taking that picture. Maybe they're having somebody else take that picture, and they have that memory, with them in their very color coordinated outfits for, the rest of time. We did get a picture that year. I will share it with you actually later as a surprise, but we did get a picture that year. And I remember being so utterly upset. I remember being upset because it was not the picture that I wanted. I I was getting that picture, color coordinated outfits and all. And really, what it ended up being was not a positive experience for anyone, because everyone was miserable and no one wanted to take the picture. And we had a lot of refusal on taking the picture. So, what happened was we got the picture. It was not one. I think, to be honest, I didn't even have it saved in my phone when I went back through and wanted to create this presentation, because it was something for me that was really so raw and so vulnerable for me, because it really threw everything in my face as to that what I wanted and what my expectation wasn't going to happen in the way that I saw it happening. And I use that language specifically because it did happen, right? We did get the picture, but it didn't happen the way that I saw in my mind it happening. And as you can see, there was a shift, right? So we had COVID, so we had a year or two that we actually missed the vacation. Sorry, I have a hair. And ultimately, when we got back down there, you can see the shift that had happened because we have beautiful pictures, we have beautiful family pictures, but in none of those family pictures are we color coordinated, matching outfits, whether it's on the beach or elsewhere, right? So this was something that I had to accept for myself. And it was something that, looking back, it was a key moment in navigating the autism diagnosis in our family that really allowed us to build a deeper connection with our children, especially our diagnosed autistic child. And by reframing that expectation, really be grateful for what we did have instead of feeling the loss for what we didn't have. So you're in the right place today if you thought an autism diagnosis would give you the answers you needed in order to connect with your child. We're going to take a step towards understanding the autistic brain style. By the end of our time together today, you're going to be better equipped to taking a strengths-based approach to navigating autism, meaning we're going to be able to better reframe our ideas of what an autistic brain style means so that we can find that peace and find that harmony in our home. So the life-changing conversation over a Diet Coke and some chicken wings. So I sat down with a family friend who I had known for years. I had actually babysat her children, and she shared a story. And going back to that series of pictures, this was between the missing picture and those most recent beautiful pictures that we have. We sat down to talk, and I knew that she had a child with a disability who was very successful. And from the outside looking in, they had it all together as a family. And I had been a little bit on the inside of that bubble doing the babysitting and the help in that family that I had. But you only know what you know, and you definitely don't know what you don't know. So we sat down and I was pretty candid with her, and I asked her, like, listen, we're navigating this. We don't know what it is yet. Again, we had not gotten that diagnosis, but what does how do you do it? How did you do it? How did you figure out how to be the best parent you could be? Give your child what you need and also have a home that is not full of strife and yelling and arguing and all the things that you don't want. And what she told me was that she essentially, I'll boil it down to a very quick anticlimactic ending to the story, was that it had nothing to do with you, and it had nothing to do with what you wanted, and it had everything to do with accepting where your child was at, meeting them where they were at, and knowing that your expectations for what you thought their life would look like are exactly that, your expectations. And sometimes those expectations need to be shifted. So the story that she told me was that essentially there was a school dance coming up. Her child, she was so nervous about her child not being asked to this dance because of the disability. And she did everything she could to make this happen for her child. I have a friend, they have a son who will go with you. You can go with a group of friends. This was prior to the time where that was even a thing, or or that was like accepted. There was still a stigma to that. And we'll get you a limo. We'll throw the before party. We'll do pictures here. We'll do all the things. She was so worried her daughter would not be asked to this school dance. And In that very hard conversation that took a lot of nerve to even have with her child, her daughter told her, Mom, I've already been asked to the school dance by 3 people, and I turned them all down because I don't want to go to the dance. It's not my thing. I already made plans with friends. We're going to go to a movie, go out to a diner, and then come home because that's what we want to do. And that's our idea of a fun night. And she said that that was her moment for realizing that it didn't matter what she wanted. And not that it didn't matter what she wanted, but her expectation for when she had a child, of course, didn't include this disability. But in that, there was a beauty that, excuse me, her daughter had already figured out what she wanted in life. And she was able to clearly communicate that when that conversation was broached. There's a poem, Welcome to Holland, to kind of drive this home. And it's all about how, as a parent, you get on a plane, you get pregnant, you get on a plane. That's the analogy, the metaphor. And you think you're going to Italy. You have your bags packed for Italy. You have all your stuff for Italy. And ultimately, when the plane lands, you realize that you landed in Holland. Holland is no less beautiful. It's got the tulips, right? It's got the windmills. It's got all the things. It's got vibrant culture. But you were expecting to be in Italy when you walked out off that plane. So you don't have the right wardrobe. You don't have the right sightseeing books. You don't have the right information. And you definitely didn't prepare for this. And what it takes to get used to Holland, what it takes to enjoy your time there, what it takes to be, make the best of your trip is a total overhaul of everything you thought to be true of parenting. And that's what we're going to talk about today. For the first decade of my career, I helped parents simplify the special education system, working with their children who already had diagnoses or learning disabilities. While the second decade, I spent navigating the system myself. So I've already shared, for a while, we were living in this gray area of not having a diagnosis. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we did receive an autism diagnosis, which I think really gave us a lot more questions than it did answers at the beginning. And that's what I do. So where we're now, we're going to talk about the autistic brain style today, but we have a short time together. So what you need to know is that there is so much more to really connecting with your child. And some of those things include those 3 buckets that are included in an autism brain style profile. So these are communication and language, social relationships and emotional responses, sensory use and interest, and ultimately connection with your child. If you don't know where you're going, you can't plan the journey. So we're going to do the overview today, and then we are going to essentially springboard you into really deepening that understanding of that autistic brain style for you to dive deeper into. While it feels like receiving a diagnosis should be the answer, it only serves to provide questions you didn't even know to ask. So if you've been on the other end of an autism diagnosis, you know this to be true, and I don't have to tell you this. You are overwhelmed. There's a grieving process that has to happen because what you thought would be true maybe isn't. You have to reframe your expectations, and ultimately you have to figure out how to make this work in your house and talk to your child. In the Maori language, Taki Watanga is the word for autism, and it means my own time and space. And I think this is a beautiful strengths-based way of looking at what autism is, because for a lot of autistic children, And when we look at the autistic brain style, what we're talking about is a different way of processing, a different way of communicating, and a different way of interacting with the world. It is no greater or no less, but just different. So the autistic brain style is broken down into those three buckets that I mentioned. We are going to focus today on the processing piece and the sensory piece. So again, those three buckets are sensory use and interest, social relationships and emotional responses, and language and communication. To do that, to understand any of these buckets, we have to go to the brain. We have to look at the brain. And there has been a ton of research that is now out there on the autistic brain and what the neurological differences of that autistic brain include. And the reason why this is so important is because for so long, there were so many misconceptions and so many myths as to what an autistic child saw from the world. All autistic research was based or had a lens of neurotypicality because it was a neurotypical brain saying what an autistic person or an autistic brain was experiencing and what their perspective was. And I mean, if we compare that, excuse me, that's like me saying that I understand, what a cat is thinking. It sounds silly when you put it into that kind of terminology, but it's the same thing. Or saying that a dog understands a cat's brain, or a cat understands a mouse's brain, a mice's brain, right? So if we do not have that brain style, if we do not have that type of brain, who are we to say what the experience of another person is? The research that's been done is scientifically based, it's research backed. And basically, what they have identified are three key things that we're going to share today. The first is that an autistic brain processes 42% more information at any given time at rest than a neurotypical brain. So let's break that down. So again, an autistic brain processes 42% more information at rest than a neurotypical brain. To really understand the why of that, we have to go into that next piece, which is the sensory piece. So our senses include sight, smell, sound, touch, taste, but it also includes three other systems: the interoception, proprioceptive, and vestibular sensory systems. And these, for a long time, flew under the radar, but have really kind of come into their own with this new research. And essentially, what the sensory piece says is that researchers have also identified the actual protein in the brain that allows neurotypical people and neurotypical brains to process, to filter out sensory information without thought. So subconsciously, unconsciously, without even thinking about doing it. And what that means is that a neurotypical brain does not hear the cars whizzing by outside. It doesn't hear the fan on the other side of the room. It doesn't feel how that tag may feel on the back of our shirt. And it doesn't feel how hungry we are, right? Because it's able to filter that information out so that your brain can focus on the task at hand, whether that's being in a conversation and processing incoming language, whether that's working on a math worksheet, whether that's listening to mom and dad and following their instruction to go do their chore, that they want done. What does this mean? Well, this means that in order to do that math worksheet, in order to do that chore that mom and dad asked you, in order to stay connected in that conversation, the autistic brain has to consciously separate, filter out, and ignore everything that's going on. Now, some of you may be sitting there like, I, I didn't even know there were trucks outside. I didn't even notice that fan over there. And that's your brain at work. But if you're sitting there and you're hearing these ambient surrounding noises, you're noticing, you're hearing something from a conversation from a room and a half away. You're noticing visual details, you're noticing smells, and they're interfering, they're impacting how you connect and interact with the world. That is very similar to an autistic child's experience, not only at home, but at school. So, in order to do these things, they have to filter out that 98% of sensory information that neurotypical brains are able to do without a thought. Now, why is this? Well, they're still looking into it. But one of the things that they have found about the autistic brain, and that is a truth, is that there are hyper-connected parts of an autistic brain. No two brains are alike. No two neurotypical brains are alike. No two autistic brains are alike. So what this means is that autism, like individuality, is a one-size-fits-one approach. It is not one size fits all. It is one size fits one. All right. What this means is that the hyper-connected parts of the brain where autism impacts a child or an individual is going to be different. And that is where we have those three buckets, because sometimes we see more in the communication and the language piece. Sometimes we see more in the sensory use and interest area. And other times we see it in the social relationships and emotional responses. The biggest piece and the biggest takeaway in this diagram is a neurotypical brain does something called synapse pruning. The fancy name for it is autophagy. And this actually starts during pregnancy and goes through adolescence. And what it is essentially it's your cells eating themselves. There's no that's not a really, it gives you a good visual, right? So your cells in an autistic brain or in a neurotypical brain, this is supposed to happen, right? Because what it does is it gets rid of redundant pathways. It gets rid of extra pathways that go from the same place to the same place. So if you think about this in our own lives, there are different avenues and different ways to get from point A to point B. As we send more information from point A to point B, our roads become more well-traveled. So instead of being a hiking trail, it turns into a highway, okay? And obviously there's some things in between like a country road or a walking path. But essentially the way it gets developed is by using that pathway over and over and over again. Not that we don't want it, but what happens is, and why the brain does this synapse pruning is because if you have 4 pathways from point A to point B, is it really necessary for us to have them all? If it's the exact same route from one point to another, we don't need 4 ways to get there. We really just need one well-developed way. So the brain will do this synapse pruning, and it will essentially get rid of the other 3 less traveled paths. An autistic brain does not do this, or does not do this to the same degree as a neurotypical brain. It is not able to prune its synapses. It does not have that cell eating process. And what happens is we keep all of those pathways, even if they're redundant or not, leading to that hyperconnectivity. Now you think like, wouldn't that be great for, for that to be hyperconnected or to have all those different pathways? Well, it's kind of like having 25 tabs open on your internet browser because we've all done that. When you have 25 tabs open, you might start to notice that your computer runs slower. The same way that if we're sending information from point A to point B, and it's the same information and it's going from the same place to the same place, and we're doing it 4 times instead of once, we may actually be slowing that processing speed down for the information to get where it's going. So going back to that idea of in their own time and space, and the processing, and how much more processing an autistic brain is doing at baseline to begin with, then you see how having those extra pathways and those extra roadways can cause a barrier. Okay. And one of the biggest pieces to that is incoming language. All right. So when you are speaking verbally and only verbally to a child, especially to an autistic child, right, we have to realize that it is taking more effort for that autistic brain to process that demand, because that's exactly what it is. Even if you are not requesting that child to do something, even if we are not requesting that brain to do something, that incoming language is a demand on the brain systems. This picture is an actual picture from Columbia University in their research in looking at what a pruned synapse looks like versus the unpruned. So they took a neurotypical on the left and an autistic on the right. And you can see where it looks like if we're thinking about this as a tree, there's very, very, very many more little branches that are coming off that tree. And all of those are those tabs that we just talked about. All right. The sensory system then, it can go through these levels, right? It's like a seesaw. I'm sorry, I'm getting a glare in my window. So when we look at those sensory systems, okay, if we're in too high of an arousal level or too low of an arousal level, this is not good for our child. It's not good for our brain. It's not good for our brain style, because ultimately, it's like that story of Goldilocks. We want to be in that just right, not too hot, not too cold. All right, just right. And that is different for every child. It is different for every child. It is different for every autistic child as well. Okay. And here are those sensory systems that we talked about. So we have hearing, we have sight, we have touch, we have smell, taste. We have that movement and gravity, which is our vestibular system. That's actually that system in our ear that takes in sound and converts it into brain activity. We have body awareness and we have our internal body signals. Right? I actually created a handout or a freebie for you all. There's a QR code on the next page, and it has this information on it. So if you'd like to scan that QR code, it should take you to that infographic that you saw on the previous page that talks about what it looks like when there is over responsiveness in one of those systems or under responsiveness in those systems. And again, this all goes back to the amount of information we are taking in and the inability to filter it out without help. All right. We the adults, we the parents, we have to figure out how to help filter out that sensory information and make sense of it. A child's journey is not a race, but a garden. A garden grows with time, not with speed. Each flower blooms in its own time. A race rewards speed, whereas a garden rewards patience. Knowing that that autistic brain sometimes needs more time to process information. We have to look at our children as gardens. We have to look at their brains as gardens. You know, when we plant a seed, there's a lot of trust that happens in between the time that we plant that seed and that it grows above ground. That time where you don't see anything happening, just because we don't see it happening doesn't mean it's not happening. There is so much happening underground when we plant that seed. And ultimately, there is growth. It's just not above ground yet. So, one of the things that we have to remember as we learn about the autistic brain style, as we learn about what we as parents, as advocates for our children can do, is that a lot of the work we're going to do, we are not going to reap the rewards right away. We have to fight that urge for instant gratification. We have to fight that urge of frustration that this isn't working and what I'm doing isn't working when we start to make these shifts. Because it's not a race. We are not comparing our autistic children to neurotypical norms. The world, the milestones, the development of our children were based on neurotypical brains. And in order to really make that shift, we have to understand that our milestones may look like inch stones, and they're going to look different. And just because they look different, just because they don't happen on the same timeline, doesn't mean they're not worth celebrating. There is no such thing as mild autism. So this is one of the biggest shifts we can make, and it's the takeaway for today that we can make this shift today. We can fight against using labels that are really outdated and don't work anymore. We are not talking about autism as low functioning or high functioning. We're not talking about it mild, moderate, severe. That is not the spectrum we're on. It is a spectrum not because it is low to high, black and white, and it is not linear. The spectrum we are on takes into account all of those different things we talked about: communication, language, social relationships, emotional responses, sensory use, our special interests. And again, all of those look different. It's one size fits one. Your child and my child may not be the same. However, what is the same is that they have an autistic brain style. And it is our job as a parent to learn about that. But deeper than that, I think it's our calling as parents of autistic children to make shifts that bring more acceptance to the world as to what autism looks like, what its impact can be. And that's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Like that's the good moments, that's those celebrating those wins. But it's also consoling ourselves, our friends, our children when there are those hard moments. But it's also talking about those hard moments, because when we don't, it's very isolating for our parents out there, for our parents of autistic children. It's an isolating enough journey, without the outdated thoughts on autism. Describing autism as mild or any other similar term, Asperger's, high functioning, it doesn't measure the individual's experience. It measures the world's discomfort with it. Describing autism as mild is not saying that that child is affected mildly. If that child was able to tell you how difficult a moment they have when something happens, when something comes up, they would not describe it as mild. They would not describe it as easy. They would not describe it as manageable or any other synonym for that word. But what they would, what it does describe is how much somebody's autism affects you and others, right? So we want to stay away from that. We want to shift away from that. I'm sorry, I'm trying to fight the glare here. We want to shift away from that. When a child is dysregulated, it's not words they need, okay? It is your calm. And that can be really difficult. But that idea of co-regulating is our building block for the future. And understanding is the step that comes before that. And when you compare your child to others, you see limits. When you compare your child to themselves, you see growth. So here is the picture, the infamous picture that I shared with you earlier, the missing picture. I have to say, I told you at the beginning, I didn't even save this picture. I did not have this picture on my phone when I went to create this presentation. And I actually had to ask a few people, the person who took it, but also my husband, because I had a feeling that he would have it. I had to ask if they had it. And a couple people had it and they sent it to me. I actually cried, which is not uncommon. I think when you're navigating this life, there's a lot of tears, happy and sad. But I actually cried when I saw this picture. And the reason why I cried was because in the moment that this was taken, it was such a heavy, isolating event for me. I felt like we were never going to be that family that I wanted us to be, or that I had expected to be. I was never going to get that picture that I wanted. I look back at this picture and listen, I'm biased, obviously, but it is a beautiful picture of my family. It is a beautiful picture of my kids. And it is a beautiful picture that captured our time there that year. And it was in that moment that I knew that I had started to, and listen, I'm not done. I'm not saying that you ever finish, but I had started to make that shift. I was on the journey to make that shift. So when I talk to you today, when I talk to anyone about this, you have to know that I understand exactly where you are. I've been there and I'm still there because, like I said, this is a lifelong shift. It's a lifelong path. It's a lifelong journey. And the only thing you can do is actually look backwards to measure your progress and not forwards. Because if you're looking forward to measure your progress, you're measuring yourself off an ideal. Whether that's a neurotypical ideal, an autistic ideal, a world ideal, what it is an unattainable ideal. Because if you are always chasing that horizon, you are never going to reach it. But when you look back and when you look at where you have been, that's really where you see the growth and how far you've come. Now, I gave you that freebie, I gave you that infographic, but I want you to do something for me. I created a quiz to help you identify your child's autistic love language. So if you've ever heard of the love languages, right, and how we communicate, and I use love platonically, right? So I use love in terms of how you show that you care about those in your life, whether it's friends, whether it's it is, in a spousal relationship, a partnership, whether it's with your child. All right. There are the love languages, right? Acts of service, gifts, all those good things. There's been books written about it. What I did was I created a quiz for you to take that will help you identify your child's autistic love language. And why this is so important is because our autistic brain styles, they have unique ways of communicating. And if you can identify this love language, you are going to be one step closer to communicating in a deeper way with your child. And it's also going to help you to identify how to connect with them. So you can scan that QR code. It should take you right to a landing page. And once you get the email and you click it, you'll have access to the quiz. So I will take any questions. Now I have to see if I can see them. All right. Thank you, Marianne. All right, so a couple questions that I had that I'll answer really quickly as everyone else gets theirs in and shares them. Um, one of the questions that got sent in is, okay, we are in the process of getting our child evaluated for an autism diagnosis. Do you have any suggestions? One of my biggest suggestions for autism diagnoses, there right now are very, very long wait lists. I don't know how it is outside of the United States, but I know within the United States, it is, you are on a very, very long wait list to see most types of doctors who will do these evaluations. My biggest suggestion, three, actually. Number one, get on those wait lists, keep those appointments, even if they seem a long time in the future. When they call you for your appointment, you can always decide if you still need that appointment. But if you're not on the wait list, you're just prolonging the time. Number two would be to look in your area to see if there are people who are specially trained in autism. There is no disrespect to anyone, but when there are certain doctors who do diagnoses, you want to make sure what you're getting at the end of it with that diagnosis is telling of what type of brain style your child has. So it's not simply the test scores and the results and the diagnosis, but it's also what they learned about your child during that evaluation process. Which brings me to my third point is that you can ask the providers that you're looking to work with if they are neuro-affirming, if they are strengths-based. Those are two things that you're really looking for when anyone is working with your autistic child. And you want the evaluation to be neuro-affirming and strengths-based as well. So there are different tests and there are different measures that you can use. There are some that are more neuro-affirming than others, meaning that it looks at your child's brain style as just a variation in wiring versus a deficit-based brain style that needs fixing, right? It's not something wrong that needs to be fixed or cured. Instead, it's simply a natural variation in our, in our species brains, and it is something that we just need to learn more about and how best to communicate with it. All right. And one other question that came through. We are okay. All right. So if you have any other questions, please get them in, and I will be sure to reach out and connect with you. And you can find me at on Instagram, or you can send me an email. Thank you for having me, and I hope that your journey is as smooth as it can be as you navigate this. Bye for now.